Today's episode is brought to you by Mazars. SoundCartel. What do you get when you mix a love of beer, a love of serving people, with a love for business? Well, for Stephen Hunt, those things led him to build a $100 million pub empire. From SoundCartel, I'm Nicole Goodman, and this is Business Essentials Daily. When he was in his late teens, just out of high school, Stephen Hunt would host get-togethers on weekends for his mates in his parents' backyard. They were boisterous and good fun, and they were the springboard to his career working in pubs, both in Australia and the UK. Fast forward a few decades, today Stephen runs Hunt Hospitality, which owns 7 pubs on Australia's east coast, employing 350 staff and a portfolio worth $100 million. He scouts and buys good pubs and turns them into great pubs. So how does he do that? Well, for starters, he says, it's those little things, those 1%ers you just got to keep an eye on. Oh, and you've got to look after your staff. Plus, Stephen Hunt reckons there are 2 must-have qualities for business success. He explains to Chris Ashmore.
The 2 things are passion and then drive. If you really enjoy it, you'll constantly be looking around for things related to it. So you're actually working when you don't realise you're working. For instance, me, I'll go to a coffee shop and I'll look at an idea and then I'll go, oh, you know what, we could implement something similar to that in our business. And then you've got to have the drive to want to do it, And once you've found that passion, you've really got to work it hard. Like I worked at one stage every day for about 7 years.
Wow.
And then I had my wife and kids, and then I went, I have to reprioritise this. And when I did, I actually started to flourish more because I was just more relaxed and was sort of getting that, people talk about work-life balance. So I then got a little bit more of that. So when I was working, I was sort of game on, I was really focused. But yeah, I always had a drive as well. So you've got to have that drive.
Mm. Well, you've built your pub empire by buying good pubs and turning them into great pubs. How do you know if a pub has the potential to be great?
For us, we look at the location to start with. And so quite often we bought pubs from operators who are quite tired. They get shop blinds, they go in the same way and they don't do promotions anymore and they're kind of burnt out. So we look at the location and then we look at the management. And if the location is good, so, we like one pub towns or we like to be on a high street. We've got one pub in a particular area and it's the only pub in the town. And it's just been fantastic for us. It goes really well. And then the Kent Hotel where I am now, that's on a high street location, so it's an entertainment precinct. And so wherever there's foot traffic, and also probably most importantly, we look at the community in the local area. So, we kind of look at the chambers of commerce, we look at the charities, and we look at who's employed, the demographic. We kind of go, does that fit with us and sporting clubs in the local area? And that's really important because it's like getting Google Maps and putting a dot where the pub is and then measuring around a couple of kilometres from there and going, okay, this is the people that will come to our pub. So that's really important for us as well.
Is that because the pub is it's a cornerstone for the community? So a good community will flock to a pub?
Absolutely. And I can give you an example of a pub it's near a river and there was a massive flood and the pub's not flooded. So everyone goes to that pub when there's a flood. So it's like, on an industrial site, you see the emergency green and white sign saying, go to this assembly point. The pub was the assembly point. So everyone just went there and then they said, right, who's sort of flooded in and let's just get a dinghy and go out there, the old tinnies. And so they would go down the river and follow down and go to a farmer and, get out and walk if they could and then go and see him and make sure he's all right. So that to me is a great summary of what a pub and a community is when they're in crisis. And the flip side of that is, when people are celebrating, they love going to the pub. You know what I mean? It's like you win your footy grand final, or you have a baby and you have a christening, or we've had quite a few weddings in some of our different pubs, which has been awesome. It's been really good. So, yeah, that's probably the main reason, I guess. Pubs are right in the centre of the community.
Interested in startup culture or an entrepreneur yourself, perhaps? Then you will love the history of the Australian startup ecosystem, a new podcast series that examines the rich history of Australian startups. Be inspired by guests like Tim Fung, founder of Airtasker, Daniel Flynn, founder of Thank You, Cameron Adams, co-founder of Canva, and the founders of VCs, Blackbird and Square Peg. Follow the history of the Australian startup ecosystem wherever you listen to podcasts. The link is also in the show notes of this episode.
And there are many things that you have to do to run a successful pub, so many little different things throughout the establishment. How do you know what to pay attention to?
I guess for me, I was very fortunate. So the first pub that I worked at, they were really, really good operators. So my boss said to me when I was 18, he goes, Steve, you've got to make sure all the light globes are working. So people like everything, working. You've got to make sure there's toilet paper in the bathroom, make sure the sinks are clean, you make sure the TVs are on the right event, you make sure the music's right for the right demographic. So you don't want Chili Peppers cranking out when you've got, the grey power in there drinking their cups of tea. Some of them like it, probably the majority don't. So we just call all these one percenters. I'll walk into a venue now, and if there's a light globe out in a particular venue and I go back there another time, you kind of go, management's losing touch with what's going on. Do you know what I mean? They're not actually paying attention to the really small things.
Yep.
Which is crucial because all of those things add up to making a customer experience good, and then therefore they'll come back. And a lot of people who come into your pub, they compare the toilets to the kitchen. So if the bathroom's clean, people subconsciously think, great, the kitchen's clean.
We hear a lot of lip service about how staff is the most important thing, but you really do take that seriously, don't you?
Oh, absolutely, because generally they're a reflection on the senior management. And so picking the right team is crucial, and getting people who care about the business is, if you're not doing it, then you're doing yourself a disservice. I hear a lot of old guys who get disgruntled with their team or have a whinge, and I'm like, you employ them. That's your job, to employ the right people. And so quite often what we do is, with the senior guys, I'll sit down before we employ them and have a meal with them, and I just it's really simple because I actually watch how they interact with people, how they eat, how they order their meals, what they're ordering, just their general demeanour. And so if you have a couple of meetings, you actually get to know them. Some people are experts at being interviewed, it should be their full-time job. So they're great at getting in there, but then they lack substance. So picking the right team, and we have employee share schemes with a couple of our teams. So basically they're part owners. So it's like a loan where you basically loan the employee shares and then they pay back the profit that it makes. It's a little bit more in depth than that, but that's probably the best way I can describe it. And then they're owners, and then they're working with you because you all benefit from it. Sometimes we offer our chefs incentives. So if they reach targets weekly, they get a bump in their pay. And so doing all that, and the third one, which is getting buy-in. So if you have a team who they're not interested in investing, they don't have the money, but getting them to have their input into the business, they'll drive it harder than you ever will, because everyone likes their own idea, right? So quite simply, they're going to push it harder. And like, I'm not pouring beers on a Saturday night, you know what I mean? So these guys are the ones who are the face of the business there. So if it's their idea, they're going to get right behind it.
Well, before we go, Stephen, any final thoughts for business owners who perhaps are looking for inspiration or some advice on running a successful business?
Yeah, I think before you get into the business, you've got to find out what you're really good at, and then it's literally get up and do your job every day. You know what I mean? Like, our job is to make people's day. And we make sure we focus on that regardless of what the circumstances are. And that can be a smile across the bar, or, remembering a customer's name or their drink, or their meal, because it makes them feel special. And regardless of what business you're in, if you're getting into the local community, it doesn't matter if you're KPMG or if, the bigger accounting firms around the world, if you're offering a personalised service, which I think the world is starting to lack, you're going to keep miles ahead of the competitors. So getting up and doing your job every day, know what your job is and get up and do it.
That was Stephen Hunt, Managing Director of Hunt Hospitality. This episode of Business Essentials Daily is produced by the team at SoundCartel. Thanks for listening. I'm Nicole Goodman. We'll bring you more Be Daily tomorrow. Follow at BE Daily Podcast across social media and head to bedaily.com.au for more from the Business Essentials Daily podcast. SoundCartel. This episode was brought to you by Mazars. To find out more, visit mazars.com.au. That's mazars.com.au.